He was the most powerful man in his half of the world, worshipped as a living god by millions. His empire was the largest that his side of the earth had ever seen. He commanded armies of tens of thousands, and had just won a long war for the throne. Then fewer than 200 strangers came out of the sea and into his mountains. In a single evening they seized him, and the greatest empire of his world began to die. This is the story of the losing side. To understand how a living god was undone, we must first see the world he ruled. High along a vast chain of mountains lay the greatest empire of his continent. It stretched for thousands of miles across peaks, deserts, and green terraced valleys. His people called it the Land of the Four Quarters. Bound together at a golden capital, great stone roads ran its whole length, with runners who carried word for days on end. His temples were sheathed in gold, for gold was thought to be the sweat of the sun. Storehouses stood full of grain and fine cloth, and no one within it went hungry. No wall and no army in that world could stand against the emperor's command. But even the mightiest house can be broken from within, and this one had been. The old emperor had died suddenly, and 2 of his sons went to war for the throne. For years brother fought brother across the mountains, and the land ran with blood. At last one brother's generals crushed the other's armies and took the loser captive. The victor now stood as sole lord of the Four Quarters, master of millions of lives. He was the son of the sun, and no man alive dared to meet his eyes. In the very season of his victory, something new appeared on the northern coast. Strange ships had come out of the ocean and set men ashore, unlike any ever seen. They were bearded and pale, wrapped in metal, and they came from beyond the sea. They rode great beasts that no one in that world had ever laid eyes upon. They carried sticks that spat fire and thunder, and long blades of grey metal. There were fewer than 200 of them, a speck against the emperor's millions. They climbed up from the hot coast into the cold heights, toward the emperor himself. He heard of their coming, and he was more curious than afraid of so small a band. He let them climb, meaning to look upon these strangers before he decided their fate. The strangers marched into a small town, set in a high green mountain valley. They found it nearly empty, its people cleared away, and they waited there uneasily. On the slopes above them spread the emperor's camp, a sea of tents and fires. Tens of thousands of his warriors covered the hillsides as far as the eye could see. The strangers were a handful in an empty town, ringed by an army beyond counting. Their captain knew he could never win such a fight out in the open, so he chose what a cornered man with nothing left to lose might choose. He hid his men and his beasts inside the buildings around the town's great square. He set his fire sticks where they could look down upon the open space below. And he sent word inviting the emperor to come and share a feast as his guest. It was not a welcome but a trap, and the emperor rode toward it without fear. If the fall of the mighty moves you, take 1 second to subscribe and stand with the losing side. The next evening, the emperor came down to the town in the fullness of his power. He was carried high on a litter of gold upon the shoulders of his lords. Thousands walked with him in fine cloth, singing, sweeping the road clean before him. But he had left his weapons behind, for he came to overweigh, not to fight. He believed that no harm on earth could touch a god among his own people. The great square filled with his unarmed followers as the sky began to darken. The strangers seemed to have vanished. Only a few came out to meet him. One of them, a holy man, came forward and held out a small book and strange words. He spoke of a far-off king and a far-off god the emperor had never heard of. The emperor took the book, could find no voice in it, and let it fall to the ground. It was the signal the strangers had been waiting for all along. In that instant, a shout went up, and the fire sticks roared from the rooftops. Smoke and thunder tore across the square, and the great beasts burst from every doorway. The bearded men charged into the packed crowd, swinging their long grey blades. The emperor's people had come to celebrate, unarmed, and they could not fight back. The riders cut through them, and the metal-clad beasts trampled all in their path. Thousands were crushed against the walls as they struggled to flee the killing ground. There was no battle here, only slaughter, in the failing light of a mountain evening. The strangers drove straight for the golden litter at the very heart of the crowd. The lords who bore it were cut down, and others rushed to lift it in their place. They held their emperor up with their own bodies until their hands were struck away. At last the strangers reached the litter and dragged the living god to the ground. In one evening, thousands of his people lay dead, and not one stranger had fallen. The Lord of Millions was now the prisoner of a few hundred men from the sea. Even in chains, the emperor saw clearly what the strangers wanted above all else. He had watched their eyes catch fire whenever they looked upon gold. And he understood. He offered to fill a great room with gold as high as he could reach, and to fill it twice again with silver, if only they would set him free. The strangers agreed, and the emperor sent his command out across the whole empire. From every temple and palace, his people stripped the gold and carried it in. It came by the ton and was melted down. A civilization's treasure poured out for one life. The room was filled, and the ransom was the greatest the world had ever known. But the strangers had never once meant to let their prisoner go free. With his gold in their hands, they put the emperor on trial for invented crimes. They condemned the son of the sun to death, though he had paid all they had asked. Fearing the fire would destroy his body, he took their god at the last, and they strangled him. The living god was dead, murdered by the men he had let climb his own mountains. With the emperor gone, the empire of the Four Quarters had no head to lead it. The strangers marched upon the golden capital and took it for their far-off king. They melted its temples, emptied its storehouses, and set a puppet upon its throne. The great roads carried conquerors now, and new masters ruled the Four Quarters. Disease came with the strangers and swept through the valleys like a silent fire. Within a single lifetime, most of the empire's millions were gone from the earth. A people who had raised cities among the clouds were broken, robbed, and scattered. It had ruled millions, and it fell to fewer than 200 men. The emperor had looked upon a tiny band and called it nothing at all. He had believed that no force on earth could ever pull down a living god. But he had never dreamed of a world beyond his mountains, and that world destroyed him. This has been the story of the losing side.